Welcome back to another insightful episode of the Thrive in Design podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Lashae Hall, CEO and founder of Thrive in Design, where we empower interior product companies to amplify their brand presence and revenue through a human-centered approach to design and strategy. Today, I am excited to welcome Susan Fernandez, Senior Vice President of Marketing at UpSpring, a strategic marketing firm dedicated to helping building and architectural product brands stand out in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Susan brings a powerful blend of creative vision and strategic expertise to everything she touches. After earning her MFA from Pratt Institute, Susan launched her creative career in New York City, where her early work in graphic design led to roles at top advertising agencies. There, she developed a deep understanding of how branding connects to human emotion. Prior to joining UpSpring, Susan was the founder and CEO of Epiphany Studio, a marketing agency focused on elevating brands across the built environment. In today's episode, we'll explore how product brands can win big at trade shows and more without overspending, uncovering smart strategies for differentiation, authentic brand storytelling, and long-term growth. Susan also shares insights from her work as a brand strategist, mentor, and co-founder of Cast Carbon, a pioneering startup advancing bio-based building materials. This is a must listen for brands looking to make a lasting impact. So let's get started. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you in the other side, right? You got to interview me on your podcast, but I want to learn more about you today. Even just reading your introduction, I'm like, let's get into this. I want to hear all the things about your journey and beyond. So, Susan, your career blends creative training, agency leadership, and strategic marketing, a path that's not always linear. So, walk us through like your experiences from the beginning and how you got to the place that you are right now at UpSpring.
Well, as you noted, it's can feel sometimes by accident because launching a creative career is not a straightforward path at all. It's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer where it's a very clear what you have to do to get to where you want to go. But ultimately, it all weaves together to give you a very unique perspective that is needed to be a creative. So I kind of really got into the design and architecture world as a child. My mom was fascinated with architecture, art, buildings, engineering. So we often went to museums. We were pulled off the side of the road to look at a bridge or a dam that was some kind of engineering marvel. And I don't know why she was obsessed with all of this, but she was. And I kind of grew up thinking, get me out of here until I maybe was in my early 20s. And I remember being in London and thinking, oh, this is a really interesting building. I wonder, it's a brutalist building. And I really realized that all these childhood excursions had kind of converted me into an art, design, and architecture nerd.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so tell me how that went from, these excursions with your mom to you discovering this passion around like architecture and design. How did that evolve into, working at agencies and now being a leader at UpSpring?
Absolutely. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get an internship to work with Paul Lashae, who's a very well-known, respected designer in New York when I was in graduate school. And she really opened up my mind to the idea that everything that you are using to communicate, whether it's a poster, whether it's a 30-second TV spot, whether it's a website, has to tell a story that is seductive. So she was really important in shaping my vision of how to communicate. And then I was, again, fortunate enough to land positions at some big ad agencies in New York. And I always got put on the kind of and I'm going to air quotes this, creative team. So we worked on really interesting projects that maybe were not as mainstream, although I did have some large CPG clients. I worked for Coca-Cola, I worked for Toyota, I worked on L'Oreal, I worked on different accounts that were kind of major accounts. But I also had this experience where I got to work on smaller brands that were just starting out and approaching them in kind of a different way.
Hmm.
This really shaped the way that I was going to communicate or learn to communicate, learned to be a creative, learn to look at a business and say, what is it that they really stand for? And how can we use that as an advantage while we build out their branding, their advertising, their strategies? And then I was fortunate enough, again, I keep saying that, but it really is in retrospect, to have access to a lot of B2B accounts. At the time, they were not considered quite as glamorous, but
Mhm.
once I started working on accounts like pavers, siding, windows, all the kinds of things that go into a building, I realized that it was where I belonged because I loved the puzzle of it. I
Mhm.
love that the person who chose the product did not buy the product, did not install the product, and did not live with the product. So I thought that was such an interesting sale, and how could you communicate through every touch point of that sale?
Yeah.
I also really loved that was my natural home, architecture and design. And I also saw that most of these companies were not telling a story. They were not they really were not engaging in more than a performance story, and I found that to be fascinating.
Yeah. And so I want to stick there real quick because storytelling I'm very passionate about, and especially when it comes to B2B sales or like B2B marketing. So for you, as you worked on brands that were like direct to consumer, like Coca-Cola, right? And then transitioning to working with up and coming brands that are B2B, what do you think that common thread is in telling an effective brand story, no matter what type of brand or their go-to-market strategy is?
I think it's all about seduction, right?
Mm,
Like you want to create something that someone wants to know more about or that sheds a light on an aspect of the brand that they had never seen before. And
mhm,
I think when we look at and Coca-Cola was all about seduction. It's all about, really creating this mini world in 30 seconds that's going to bring you in, and everything ends with that Coke product and the kind of thing. And it takes you on a little journey. And I just thought it was insane that we have these products and they want to talk about the performance almost in bullet points. But no one buys that way. We all buy on emotion. And
mhm,
so one of the first products I worked on was a paver product, and they had about 30 colors at that time. And instead of just naming them what they were, we really took a cue from, J. Crew and named some of them wheat, stardust. We really changed the way that architects would pick a paver or a landscape architect and have it be
mhm.
in line with giving the brand some kind of complexity, some kind of emotion, something so small as instead of it being gray 642, you know, it was Mercury or something like that, because we lose when we talk about performance or we talk about products that can be considered a commodity, we really lose this idea of this is a human to human communication and it has to be seductive.
Yeah, I love that. And I see that happening a lot where a brand will typically think, especially internally, they're like, hey, here's this product that we have. here are the features, benefits, and features, and let's lead with that. But like you said, the art of storytelling is in seduction, it's in emotion and making sure that you resonate with the audience in that way. And I think too, it comes from really like building upon like something that's intriguing to them and using their language as well. Of course, you'll get them with the product features and benefits like once they are pulled in by that seductive story, but leading with that is not always the right way to go. So I love that you pointed that out.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't get their attention, it doesn't matter what message you have.
Yeah.
If someone's not listening, they're just not listening.
Absolutely. And especially like now, I feel like with social media and AI and all the things that are like coming at us through all of these different touch points, it is imperative that you stand out so that your audience can listen. So before we dive deeper into more things about like brand storytelling and marketing, I want to take a step back so people get to understand like where you fit in the market right now. So we talked about like a little bit about your journey. So tell us what Upspring PR is known for in terms of their integrated campaigns with PR, marketing, creative branding, etc.
Absolutely. So UpSpring sits, squarely in the built environment. So we serve AEC brands, we serve manufacturers, prop tech, developers. This is our entire world. And we are able to, because we have such a deep bench of experts, we're able to help companies grow and scale. And so everybody can say that. What does that mean? But here's a truth about the world. If you want to get into an industry, you have to be in the conversation before you have the experience. It's all chicken and egg, right? Like, you started your own company. You have to start somewhere. You have to be able to bring clients in before you've actually done the work. And so PR and marketing work really well to help clients. First of all, a company has a unique perspective, whether it's an architecture firm that specializes in data centers, in AI integration into education, in residential. It really doesn't matter what their expertise is. Same thing with a product. If a product has like a certain high performance for a specific industry or project type, it really doesn't matter what that expertise is if they're not able to build that awareness around their leadership there. So I always say that we help clients shape their industry conversation rather than react to it.
Mm.
And in doing all of that, they're able to get into those new markets. So, for example, during the pandemic, we had a real problem with housing shortage. Everyone became aware of just, with people all like sort of sheltering in place. I guess that's not the right word, but the right phrase. But people were staying home. And so there still were people who needed to move, and rents were going up or going down depending on where you lived. And the focus on the shortage of the housing crisis became very acute.
Mm-hmm.
And we started thinking, how can we solve that housing crisis? So one of the ideas that was floated out was, what if we took decommissioned cruise ships, because nobody wanted to get on a cruise, and we turned them into, they would stay in port and become apartments. And that's really very feasible because they all have bathrooms. There's restaurants on board. There's gyms, healthcare. You can get anything you need on a cruise ship. So we
Absolutely.
kind of came up with the idea of like, what if we took these decommissioned cruise ships and we made them apartments? We kind of flooded the Miami, Florida market, the media, with this idea, and it really took hold, and people started to think this is a possible solution out of this housing crisis. This is an example of how we helped a client who wanted to get into designing cruise ships
Mm.
did not have any experience. So we floated them to the press with this idea as thought leaders. We said this firm has a great idea on how to rescue the cruise ship industry. And so they talked through an idea that really actually never came to fruition, but it ignited the cruise ship industry. They thought, oh my gosh, here's a firm that understands our crisis, and they're showing us a way out, a path forward. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden, this firm was able to step in as a thought leader
Mm-hmm.
and as the visionary, and began to get a million RFPs from cruise ships that said, we know this pandemic's going to end, and we want to be ready to offer customers like the best cruise experience. So we need the best design, most forward-thinking partner that we can find. And that's the way that you use PR and marketing to break you into new industries.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like strategic PR at its finest, right? Because that was going to be my next question. Because I feel like some people don't really know what PR entails. They might think, oh, okay, like you might need a press release, you might need some media contacts. But what you just said is like breaking down a strategy of like, no, this is more than just like putting out a story or information. It's like, how can we position you as a thought leader, whether you have the experience or not, and put you at the center of the conversation to do something new. Now, that something wasn't necessarily the topic in that example of turning the cruise ships into housing as a solution, but it actually positioned them to get more business or in new RFPs, which is awesome. Before I even knew what PR was, I was like implementing that for like my own personal brand. And then I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. So with PR and marketing integrating, are there any like misconceptions that brands have about either one of those things and how they integrate together?
That's a great question. There's a lot of misconceptions. One, PR is really doing a press release.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody may pick up that press release, but very rarely. PR is a nice to have. With the rise of LLMs, so the ChatGPT,
Claude.
Claude, any of the LLMs, PR is so when getting press in terms of thought leadership or even project profiles, it can be anything, is viewed as more credible than what's on your own website where you describe your products or your services. Because the LLMs we use Google to find options, and then we use the LLMs to evaluate those options.
Right.
I've got 5 different types of siding. I'm going to upload the spec sheets, or even better, just provide a link to the live spec sheets. And I want you to rate those for me and do an evaluation. Well, the LLMs don't use paid media as a source.
Right.
And if you have a lot of links where you are really taking that thought leadership role in your industry, the words that you have on your page mean more. So it's really interesting how that's changed PR. So this idea that it's a nice to have, it's really no longer a nice to have, and it should be fully integrated with your marketing for a strategy. So we have a lot of brands that do hospitality. They can do healthcare because healthcare takes its cues from hospitality. So whether you're a product that is for hospitality and you can modify it for senior living, you can modify it for, just straight up healthcare hospitals, you can do that by writing about it on your website, by working with the press to have thought leadership pieces, whether it's even just a quote from someone at your company. It doesn't have to be a full story. Our PR is really well-rounded. So we look at we look at media outlets, like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, as much as Arc Digest,
Yeah.
and all the trade publications. So you have to really take a well-rounded approach because PR and marketing should be helping you scale, helping you grow into the places that you want to grow into. And also, this idea that PR and marketing are solely about you going and growing your business from external getting clients. It's also about talent attraction. So we know that for a fact. We have a shrinking talent pool,
Mhm.
and people now want to go and look at everything about a firm or a company they're going to go work for. So they want to see, what is the press saying about them? What does the website look like? And this idea that you're going to attract top tier talent without that it's no longer, the right idea.
Yeah. So let's take a step back for a moment because Susan, I'm obsessed with AI. I love AI. And I love to test out different platforms, see how they're working, how they work well, how they don't work well, how they integrate into my own business, and how I can also recommend product manufacturers to integrate it into what they're doing. So you said this acronym that everybody might not know what it means, LLM, which stands for large language models. And it's a type of basically artificial intelligence platform in the way that they are building the platform in the language that they're speaking. For layman's terms, for those of you who are listening, you're like, what is an LLM? What is large language models? It's essentially the platform that ChatGPT is built on, or the language that like ChatGPT is built on in other platforms as well. I know I am a ChatGPT girly all the way, every single day. Now, let's take a moment to stop right there because you said a very key point, especially from our audience, right? Like brands need to have this integrated strategy that integrates PR, that integrates marketing, that has a story to tell, but they can also use these LLMs as a source. So in the example that you just gave, it would more so be maybe a designer that might be using or downloading like the spec sheets from multiple manufacturers and then uploading it to the LLM and asking for their feedback about, the spec sheets. So if the designer is using that LLM like that, what should the manufacturer be thinking about as they are structuring their brand story or spec sheets or PR so that the LLM is maybe, I don't know, giving the designer what they need in the process, right? Because all the LLMs are really run by what they're learning and what they're being asked of.
Yes, great question. So, first off, we will always need our spec sheets in PDF format, at least right now, because a lot of times a designer has to email that to someone else or put it in a drive for other people to look at. But it is really important now to have your spec sheets as live copy. So if a designer may not take all the time or may not find the spec sheet really easily for whatever reason, if your UX isn't good and they can't figure out where it is, or maybe they just don't feel like, downloading it, you need to have all that copy live. Your messaging needs to be very clear. If you have certifications, if you're cradle to cradle certified, if you are, have whatever information that you have that can further prove or help sell your products needs to be live and active on your website. And that includes like how you tag everything, your photos. Remember, I always think of it as like they understand information, but they can't read. They can't really go in and like look at all these photos unless you have really good tags on these images. If you're just asking it to go do an evaluation, you want to make sure that you're giving the LLM as much information as possible.
Yeah.
And again, the LLM is looking at that information, but it's also rating that information. Is this brand, is this project, is this firm, does it have press? Is the press pointing to this brand to say it's a leader? If so, this information is now weighted as more credible. Then could be the exact same copy, but on a different website. that doesn't have that press mentions. So you have to really think about it now as more of an integrated system. Like, it's not enough for us to have a great product. It's not enough for us to have a great spec sheet. I need that copy live. I need to make sure that we are being very diligent about any kind of certification, any kind of additional information that would help, and then make sure that we are being mentioned in the press so that we are perceived as a better option.
Yeah. And that really ties into many like core pillars, right? You have your SEO, is basically what you just said. You have your press slash PR, you have your marketing strategy. Now, are there any core pillars that we have not discussed that should go into an effective like go to market plan for product and design brands right now?
Well, in terms I think that does a good job. You know, we have press, we have marketing, and in that marketing, I would include social, obviously, and paid, obviously. Having a strategy for the LLMs, and then really on the press side, it's not just about getting articles, getting mentions, getting quoted. But with all the rise of the digital world, people still identify industry leaders, whether you're a manufacturer or you're a principal at a firm, is through, speaking engagements, really having a very active profile, even in manufacturing, a
Yeah.
personal profile on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I love that. And that's a really good point because I feel like thought leadership is so important right now. It's even come up in like research that I've looked at from Think Lab and how important for just resonating with your audience and different generations will lead you to getting more specifications and then ultimately more sales. So as we think about other things as well, so I know we talked about the PR, the digital marketing. Two things I want to ask you about is one, paid marketing. In our industry, I don't see a lot of brands doing paid advertising. Like we are in 2026 season and I still don't see a lot of ads. What do you think is up with that? What do people need to know to feel comfortable with it?
I think, to be honest, I love this industry, but we are slow to adapt.
Yeah.
It is really kind of remarkable how we can be that way. I think one of my favorite things to do is run a competitive analysis for a prospect. And one of our tools that we use is SEMrush. When you pull that up, it now also has an AI ranking. So I think that's pretty interesting. But it will tell you who's running paid and who isn't. And I think paid is really important. I think we're going to have a big renaissance I think AI is going to bring on a creative renaissance. I think that brands are going to be able to be much more opinionated. They're going to be able to not always be so gently, softly, nice. We're here for everybody. I think people want real differentiation. And I think that paid media it's going to have to become part of your marketing plan.
Yeah.
If you are not using paid media, you're missing out on an incredible awareness building tool. It's not always a conversion tool, but again, first we have to get in someone's mind.
Yeah.
And especially in the product category, building materials, architectural products, architects and designers see hundreds of products every day. You've got to stay top of mind with them. And I think it's just a matter of time before brands really dig in. Now, what paid media is going to look like can be different. So is it always going to be Google AdWords? Is it going to be boosted campaigns on LinkedIn? Is it going to be super targeted? YouTube, I believe, is still kind of in its infancy
Mm-hmm.
as far as brands are concerned. And I think that's going to blow up. So, paid can be other things just than Google AdWords.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to seeing how it evolves. All right. Just having like studied, ads, I took like a whole course and have implemented it for a few of my clients in the past. But I look forward to seeing how it's adopted by specifically like the built environment materials, architectural materials, and all of that in the next few years, especially how AI might impact that. So, the other thing that I wanted to get into with you is trade shows, right? We're in this post pandemic. I don't even know what we're in anymore, Susan. But trade shows, I feel like they still haven't come back to the way that they were before. I've heard people say about one specific trade show last year that, thousands less were in attendance of what they were used to. So, what would you say is the role of trade shows right now, and how could a brand like strategically use them or integrate them into their brand strategy?
Absolutely. Well, I am fresh back from KBIS
Oh,
and the
yes.
Builder Show. And I have to say, I thought it was a great show. It was really well attended. I felt the energy was just about where we were in 2019 when I was at the show right before we did lockdown, or was that 2020? Anyway, I think they're back. I think that you use trade shows are the best place to form that personal connection. People really show up with questions. They want to learn about your products. They're there to be fully engaged. And PR is going to do a great job warming up those attendees. So when they come to you, we don't want people walking into your booth. Sure, you're going to get people come in and say, wow, I've never heard of you. What do you make? Tell me your story. But that really shouldn't be what a trade show is about. A trade show is the chance to talk to the team in person and ask all of your questions and really get to know your regional sales manager. Get to
Absolutely.
know, like, well, wow, I didn't know you guys, this is your new products coming out. We want them really warmed up, and we want people to have your booth number on their list. They put together a list before the show. They're walking the show. They might do day one to see their favorite brands, and then day two, they're going to go back and see, the booths that interested them, or they're going to start on the left-hand side of the building and work over to the right. But whatever their kind of approach is, we want your booth to be circled ahead of time. I'm coming there. I have a real reason to be there, and I'm going to deepen my relationship. And I find that fundamentally, the teams are not, we don't do a good job warming up for the trade show.
Mhm.
If I get one more email that's like, thanks for stopping by our booth. If you'd like to have any questions,
Oh my
you know,
gosh, yeah.
then I'm just like, I don't like you. You don't even, yeah, that took 2 seconds to write. But also, training the team when folks come to the booth. I had a great experience with a hospitality design team that walked the show, walked BDNY, and they were giving us feedback every time they came out of a booth. So we'd say, all right, what did you think? Well, here's a product we specify all the time. And the team who was working the booth, one, didn't know who we were, so our salesperson wasn't there, which is not always the worst thing.
Right.
If you have a show in the East Coast, you might not send your West Coast sales folks there. But then the sales people did not know how to talk about the brand. So they would be asked a lot of the times, what do you know about us? What do you think about us?
Like it's a quiz.
Yes. And then maybe not showing the latest product,
Yeah.
which is, really having a strategy. So what is your team there to do? If they're there to convert, if they're there to build personal connection, don't just leave it to them to say, like, hey, go do that. Let's talk them through some strategies to do that.
Yeah. And that's really important. Like, Susan, I've worked for several manufacturers during my career, and I've worked in the booths at many trade shows. And I can't tell you one time that we had a strategy session where before the trade show to say, like, here's how we effectively tell our story. Here's what we are aiming to do in the booth. Here's how we want to convert. This is or even here's our KPIs or how many projects we're looking to get out of this trade show. And I've worked for bigger manufacturers and that has never happened. So I would love to see like more training around like just a sales team when it comes to trade shows, because with all of the money that these companies are investing to be there, to be on the floor, it's crucial that you have a ROI there.
Absolutely crucial. And the other thing that I saw at particularly at KBiz is that we had a client there. Because we've done all the lead up to the show, we had press coming by every day. So we had our PR team there on the ground, and then we had press that had maybe not responded, but they definitely saw something they loved, so they came by. Another way that you can grow that interest in the press is we did a lot of collaborations at that booth. So they had interior designers who did portions of the booth that are their kind of brand ambassadors.
Mhm.
They had a way of charging phones that is integrated into the granite surface. So that was one of their partners. They partnered with an outdoor kitchen company. They did so many smart partnerships that if you came to their booth, it was like being able to see how all these products could integrate,
Yeah.
and it fueled the interest in the other brands, as well as push this brand forward as somebody who's being very innovative and,
Yeah.
the brand to watch. So having the pre-show press build up so they want to come and see you, get the attendees educated so they feel like when they're coming there, they're not meeting you for the first time. They're going to see someone they know, having the team trained, and then thinking beyond your little 8 by 10 booth. How can we bring in like-minded brands that really can build an experience?
Yeah, and I've talked about that specifically on another one of my episodes of the podcast. I'll have to drop it in the show notes. But I feel like too, those collaborations are also beneficial to the designer coming there, because in all occasions when they're designing, they're specifying multiple things for a project. So if you can make it easy for them to understand how the granite goes with this charging device, or how it can go with the millwork, or whatever it is, allow them to like imagine how all of these things can integrate together. And when done well, like I love it. I love it. So, Susan, we talked about a whole lot of things today in terms of your career, how you got to where you are, the strategy that goes behind the PR, the marketing, whether that's digital or paid, trade shows, and why they're so important. But the one thing that I want to touch on before we close out is measuring the success measuring the success of all of these things, right? How would you say a brand should measure the ROI of what they're doing with their go-to-market strategy, whether that's the PR, the marketing, or any of the other things that we talked about today?
Great question. So some of this is absolutely measurable. You can measure how many press mentions, how many full placements, how many impressions in the press. You can measure your ads click-through rate. You can see, are we growing website traffic? Once the traffic's there, are we growing how many pages they look at? Are they converting with forms? There's so much that you can measure that are hardcore KPIs. Are we growing followers? How is my engagement? How many people have looked at my profile on LinkedIn? How many, if we're going to focus on a certain region, how many inquiries are we getting? Are we growing sales in that area? Are we growing sales into a specific sector? So there's a whole lot that you can measure that's very, very concrete.
Mhm.
And then there are things that are less tangible in measurements. So PR can be a short-term as well as a long-term gain. We want to build that industry expertise. We want to say, we have ideal customer profiles. We also have ideal project and building profiles. My product fits perfectly in this environment. I want to know how many more buildings like this are being built and how can I get into that. So there's ways to have that PR and marketing help with that growth that is not always immediately measurable. And certainly no one's going to measure every little thing, but having like your KPI dashboard that shows how your team is doing, but also it being okay to have a lot of efforts that aren't going to pay off this year or immediately, as well as it's okay to do something and fail. It
Yeah.
really is. And you have to do it as a business. If you do not do it as a business, you are not even getting close to the amount of growth that you can have. You will
Yeah.
never get to this whole other version of your company, version of your brand, version of yourself if you are too afraid to take a chance and say, you know what the KPI on that was? Never do it again. It's okay.
And that's important too. We're coming to the end of our episode, but you just made a really good point, right? Because people might come to UpSpring, they might come to me as a consultant, much smaller than UpSpring, and they're like with the expectation, like, okay, you guys said I need to do this go-to-market strategy, this PR, this marketing, and they have hopes of definitely hitting the KPI. But with PR, with marketing, sometimes it might not work, right? We don't have a magic ball to say, like, this will definitely hit the KPIs. We can use the research in understanding the market or understanding your audience. You can use your experience of like what worked for somebody else or what worked for another brand or what worked in another vertical. But sometimes it might lead to a failure. You just have to be willing to like try something else or pivot to say like the example that you gave earlier of the designer that was looking to get into cruise ships. It didn't necessarily lead to housing, creating housing, but it led to something else. And having that long-term strategy or just being in it for the long game is so crucial. So I'm glad you pointed that out before we closed out. All right. So Susan, as we wrap up, if you were to give a brand that's listening, they might be up and coming, especially one tip around storytelling and brand strategy for 2026, what would you say to them?
I would say authenticity rules.
Yeah.
So designers they don't want fluff. They want to know the real thing. And you shouldn't craft a story that you think is going to sell. You should craft a story that is so authentic that every experience from the website, social media, meeting Joe in sales, having the product delivery, the quality of the product, everything feels in line. And you can only do that when you are really honest and authentic about yourself and your brand, your company.
I love that. And so, Susan, if anybody wants to find out more information about UpSpring PR or connect with you online, where can they find you guys?
They can find us at weareupspring.com, and they can find me at susan@upspringpr.com.
Yes. And if you just so happen to be listening to this episode when it airs or before March 28, 2026, Susan and I actually will be doing a panel together at NEWH Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. on March 28th. So if you just happen to be at that show, at that conference, please come to our panel and we'll be discussing even more details about these topics that we shared today. So Susan, thank you for being on the show and I look forward to continuing to connect with you.
Nicole, it is always a pleasure. I just love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.